Aborigines were torn from their homes, forced to forget their culture and native language in an effort to integrate them into a European society. These effects are the result of the Aborigines Act of 1934, which molded what it meant to be a half-caste child in Australia during the 20th century. Since the first European fleet occupied Australia on January 26, 1788, conflict has been a subtle, driving force between the natives and the newcomers. The eventual result of this struggle was the creation of the Aborigines Act of 1934, which allowed the government to assume a position of responsibility over the offspring of a European and a native Australian Aboriginal, children commonly referred to as half-caste. Certain rights of these children and their families were in constant flux as the Act was amended and repealed over the years. The Aborigines not only lost the rights to their children, but of their freedom, citizenship, and culture as well. As the Aborigines continued to have their responsibilities overtaken by the government took more rights away from half-castes and Aborigines. In turn, responsibilities of the children fell upon the European officials during these times of uncertain, changing law. Because of this, the European occupation of Australia marked the beginning of a time of major political change and turmoil. The battle for rights and responsibilities of Aborigines and half-castes would prove to be a long, tedious struggle. This unfairness and lack of respect towards Aborigines can be traced back to Watkin Tench, officer of the first European fleet to Australia. He described the Aborigines to be savages with human qualities, their society low on the scale of humanity. It was Tench's belief that these societies, like any others, could be improved through the triumph of civilization, good order, and the Christian message. Tench and his European associates sought to divert the Aborigines from their different primitive ways. These revelations led to the desire to implement new laws that would govern the lives of Aborigines. The urgent feeling of sudden responsibility was motivation for the European government to take over, but fear was a driving factor as well. Fear spawned the belief that Europeans and Aborigines couldn't live in harmony. It was one or the other.
Where a policy of laissez-faire followed, the Aborigines would probably be extinct in Australia within 50 years.
Originally, this was the attitude of many European government members, the belief that Aborigines would simply disappear into a predominantly European society. Over the years, this idea proved to be false. The government's solution was to set in motion a series of acts to eliminate the Aboriginal population and culture, which led to the creation of the Aborigines Act of 1934. The foundation for this change lies in the Aborigines Act of 1869, which allowed the government to assert basic control over the lives of Aboriginal families. Later, the Act was amended in 1911 when a chief protector for the Aborigines and half-castes was named. The basic responsibilities of a chief protector lay in the notion of keeping Aborigines from physical and political harm. Following this act, the Training of Children Act was born in 1923. This allowed the Chief Protector to re-educate and relocate both Aboriginal and half-caste children to established institutions. Thus, these children were forced to desert their families and turn to a new life as wards of the state, learning the language and culture of the Europeans.
I was ward of state till I was 7, and so I didn't get to live with my mum till I was 7. And by that time, I'd been sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally abused.
Specialized institutions were created for the purpose of altering the lives of Aboriginal and half-caste children. Part of this rigorous transformation included complete isolation from their family and culture. Inhabitants were often educated at these institutions and were later placed in the care of a European family. Most of the time, they were not treated as family members, but as servants, and many suffered regular abuse. At this point, the Australian government was made entirely of Europeans. They continued to extend their power over half-caste and Aboriginal children, taking more rights away from their parents. They also established more institutions to commune with the responsibility of caring for the children. These events all led up to the creation of the Aborigines Act of 1934, a combination of all previous acts. This act had the most drastic impact on Aboriginal lives, more so than its predecessors.
It absolutely obliterated any rights that Aboriginal people may have sought to enjoy.
The year 1934 was a political climax in the dispute between the natives and the newcomers. Unlike previous laws in which Aboriginal families could fight injustice together, this act intensified the driving need to eliminate all Aboriginal culture. If a child was an Aboriginal or a half-caste, it was a legitimate reason to remove them from their home while reshaping their perceptions of culture and lifestyle.
I was taken away. I never knew my grandmother, and I never knew that side of the family. So for me, it's like, well, who am I? Where do I come from? Where do I belong?
Aboriginal and half-caste children were now owned, bred, and educated through the government. It is estimated that 100,000 children were seized by the government as a result of the Aborigines Act of 1934.
My view is that unless the Aboriginal population is steadily absorbed into the white, the process will soon be reversed, and in 50 years, the white population will be absorbed into the Aboriginal.
Europeans were fearful that if Aboriginal culture was not extracted from Australia, it would consume the entirety of European culture instead. Thus, this revelation led to the creation of many laws that inhibited the rights and responsibilities of Aborigines, most prominently the Aborigines Act of 1934. The rights and responsibilities of Aborigines and half-castes have been a constant source of dispute between the natives and the newcomers over the years. Attempts to settle these disputes have deftly shaped the rights and responsibilities of both ethnic groups. The rights of half-caste children were seized from the hands of the parents and placed into those of the government. Aborigines lost rights to their unique culture and lifestyle as Europeans gained the right to take it from them. Now, the responsibility of caring for these children fell to the government. The government saw this as an opportunity to serve the European society by eliminating overwhelming Aboriginal culture. The Aborigines Act of 1934 helped the government uphold this promise to their people, while Aborigines and half-castes suffered under the Act's unfairness. Thus, the Aborigines Act of 1934 impacted both the rights of the Australian Aborigines and the responsibilities of their foreign government, as a testament to a long-lasting political battle for justice. The damage of the Aborigines Act of 1934 can still be seen in present-day Australia. On National Sorry Day, the annual public apology from the government to Australia's native people, European officials take care to acknowledge their mistakes. But this, even combined with the repealing of the Act in 1969, is still not enough. The horror and tragedy, as well as loss of rights experienced in the 1900s, can be felt through present Aboriginal generations as well as future ones. The injustice and ugly connotations associated with the Aborigines Act of 1934 not only affected the rights and responsibilities of Australian people, but warped the entire history of a race as well. The fight to restore the rights of Aborigines and undo the damage of the 1934 Act isn't over. It's the responsibility of people today to make a better future for these Indigenous people.
Today we honour the Indigenous peoples of this land, the oldest continuing cultures in human history. We reflect in particular on the mistreatment of those who were stolen generations. We apologise for the laws and policies of successive parliaments. A future where this parliament resolves that the injustices of the past, a future based on mutual respect, mutual resolve and mutual responsibility.